I stood in the middle of my backyard, mouth hanging open, completely stunned, at the wooden fence cutting diagonally across what used to be my pristine garden. My prized roses were trampled, the bird bath was knocked over, and my carefully manicured lawn was now bisected by an ugly, hastily constructed wooden barrier. On the other side stood Melissa Wilson, or Karen, as the neighborhood had not so affectionately nicknamed her, clipboard. In one hand, sun visor pulled low over her narrowed eyes. "This isn't your property anymore," she announced with smug satisfaction, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "The HOA has reclaimed this section as community land. It's all perfectly legal." I was about to respond when the sound of tires on gravel caught my attention. A sheriff's deputy was walking up my driveway, notepad in hand. Karen's face lit up with vindictive pleasure. "Perfect timing," she said with a triumphant smile. "I called them to report your interference with community improvement." The deputy approached us, eyes scanning the scene. "Are you Melissa Wilson?" he asked, his gaze settling not on me, but on Karen. Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, that's me. I'm the HA president. Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions about an unauthorized construction project." I couldn't help the small smile that crept onto my face as Karen's expression transformed from smugness to confusion. I had spent years saving for this house, my dream home in Oakage Estates. The neighborhood was peaceful with tree-lined streets and well-maintained properties. Yes, the HOA had strict rules, but I figured that was the price of living somewhere so nice. I'm a landscape architect by profession, and the spacious backyard was what had sold me on the property. I'd spent months creating the perfect outdoor sanctuary with a vegetable garden in one corner, flower beds lining the perimeter, and a small pond with a waterfall feature. The trouble started about 6 months after I moved in. Melissa Wilson had been elected HOA president the month before, and she wasted no time making her presence known. She'd patrol the neighborhood daily, measuring grass height with a ruler, and leaving violation notices for infractions as minor as having a hose visible or a mailbox that was half an inch too short. The neighbors had started calling her Karen behind her back, and the nickname stuck. At first, I managed to stay off her radar. My yard was immaculate, my trash cans properly concealed, and my house painted in HOA-approved colors. But then I overheard her at a community meeting discussing a beautification project that would enhance property values for everyone. She kept glancing in my direction as she spoke, but I didn't think much of it. After all, what could she possibly find wrong with my property? 3 weeks later, I returned home from a business trip to find 3 trucks parked on the street in front of my house. Workers in reflective vests were unloading lumber and fencing materials onto my driveway. When I demanded to know what was happening, the foreman handed me a wrinkled paper with an HOA letterhead. "Got orders to put up a fence," he said with a shrug. "Something about creating a walking path for the community." The HOA president said it's all approved. I immediately called Karen, who arrived 15 minutes later in her white SUV with HOA President Custom printed on the driver's door. She stepped out wearing a pastel pantsuit and that ever-present visor, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "We've reviewed some old neighborhood maps," she explained with exaggerated patience, as if talking to a child. "This section of your yard was actually designated as common area when the development was first planned. We're simply reclaiming what already belongs to the community." When I asked to see these supposed maps, she waved a folder of papers vaguely in my direction, but wouldn't let me examine them. "The board has already approved this project," she said curtly. "If you interfere, you'll be fined $500 per day for obstruction of HOA business." I tried calling other board members, but mysteriously none returned my calls. I sent emails that went unanswered and left voicemails that disappeared into the void. Later, I would learn that Karen had a habit of scheduling emergency board meetings when certain members couldn't attend, then pushing through her pet projects with minimal oversight. Those who questioned her methods often found themselves targeted for petty violations or social ostracism. The construction continued despite my protests. In just 2 days, they had erected a fence that cut through nearly a third of my backyard, destroying my vegetable garden and damaging my irrigation system in the process. Karen had the audacity to have a sign installed, "Oakage Estates Community Path, proudly sponsored by your HOA." I knew I needed evidence, so I contacted Mike Reeves, a land surveyor, recommended by a colleague. He arrived the next morning, equipment in tow, and spent several hours taking measurements and consulting official county records. His conclusion was unequivocal. "This is 100% your property," he confirmed, showing me the detailed survey report. "There's no easement, no community designation, nothing that would give the HOA any right to build here. Not only that, but they've encroached on your land by approximately 27 feet at the widest point. Armed with this information, I gathered every relevant document I could find. My deed property records, plat maps, the surveyor's report, and photographs of the damage. I also installed security cameras around my property, just in case Karen decided to escalate the situation further. That evening, I received a neighborhood-wide email from Karen announcing a special HOA meeting to celebrate the successful first phase of our community pathway project. The email went on to detail plans for reclaiming underutilized sections of several other properties as well. My blood boiled as I realized I wasn't her only target. I was just the first. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse with Karen presiding from a raised table at the front of the room. She had created a PowerPoint presentation showcasing before and after photos of my yard, praising herself for transforming and used space into a community asset. Several board members nodded along, though I noticed a few uncomfortable glances exchanged when she described how she had negotiated with the homeowner, meaning me. When the floor opened for questions, I stood up. The room fell silent as I approached the front carrying a folder of documents. I'd like to know, I began calmly, under what authority the HOA removed plants from my property, damaged my irrigation system, and constructed a fence on land that, according to county records and a professional survey completed yesterday, belongs exclusively to me. Karen's smile never wavered, but her knuckles whitened around her gavel. As I've already explained to you privately, we have documentation showing that area was designated as community property in the original development plans. I'd like to see that documentation, I said loud enough for everyone to hear, because I have here the original plat map, my property deed, and a survey report all confirming that the land is mine. I also have photographs of damage to my property valued at over $3,000. Murmurs spread through the room. Karen quickly called for order and abruptly ended the question period. We'll take this matter up privately, she hissed as she brushed past me. You're making a big mistake. The next morning, I visited both the county permit office and my attorney. I learned that no permits had been filed for the fence construction, another violation of both HOA bylaws and county regulations. My lawyer, Elena Martinez, specialized in property disputes and took immediate interest in the case. This is textbook overreach, she said after reviewing my documents. And if she's planning to do this to other homeowners, we're looking at a pattern of behavior that could constitute fraud and abuse of power. We filed a lawsuit against both Karen personally and the HOA board for trespassing, property damage fraud, and violation of HOA bylaws. We also reported the unauthorized construction to the County Code Enforcement Office, which promptly issued a stop work order for the entire pathway project. Word of my legal action spread quickly through the neighborhood. Within days, my phone was ringing with calls from other homeowners who had experienced similar bullying from Karen. One had been fined repeatedly for a fence that Karen claimed was 2 inches too tall, despite having received prior approval. Another had been denied permission to install a medical access ramp for his wife, who used a wheelchair. A third discovered that Karen had been entering their backyard while they were at work to document violations. Each story was more outrageous than the last, and together they painted a picture of a woman drunk on the small power she'd been given. But more importantly, several board members finally broke their silence, revealing that Karen often acted without proper board approval and sometimes forged signatures on official documents. County investigators arrived the following week. They interviewed neighbors, examined the construction site, and reviewed HOA financial records. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Not only had Karen bypassed proper approval processes, but she had also diverted HOA funds to pay for the project by falsifying invoices. The construction company she hired was owned by her brother-in-law, a clear conflict of interest she had never disclosed. The confrontation came on a Saturday morning. I was in my front yard talking with Elena about our case when Karen drove up. In her SUV, she stormed toward us, waving a handful of papers. I have proof this is community property, she shouted, her face flushed with anger. And I filed a countersuit against you for defamation and interfering with HOA business. Before Elena could respond, a county sheriff's car pulled into my driveway, followed by a vehicle from the district attorney's office. 2 deputies approached, accompanied by a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase. Melissa Wilson? One deputy asked. Karen straightened her visor and adopted her official tone. Yes, I'm the HOA president. These people are trespassing on community property. The deputy handed her an envelope. This is a court order to cease all construction activity and remove the unauthorized structures from this property within 48 hours. The woman in the suit stepped forward. Ms. Wilson, I'm Amanda Chen from the district attorney's office. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of criminal fraud, forgery, trespassing, and misappropriation of funds. Karen's face drained of color. This is ridiculous. I'm enforcing HOA rules. You can't arrest someone for doing their job. We have evidence that you forged board member signatures on at least 7 official documents. Ms. Chen continued calmly. We also have financial records showing you diverted over $15,000 of HOA funds to your brother-in-law's construction company without board approval or competitive bidding as required by your bylaws. As the deputies began reading Karen her rights, neighbors emerged from their homes, watching in stunned silence. The woman who had terrorized the community with her clipboard and violation notices was now being led to a patrol car in handcuffs, her carefully maintained composure crumbling with each step. "This is all a misunderstanding," she called out desperately to the gathering crowd. "I was improving the neighborhood, increasing property values. You'll all regret this when your home prices drop." No one stepped forward to defend her. In fact, a few people began to clap as the patrol car drove away. The legal proceedings moved swiftly after that. The court ordered the immediate removal of the fence and full restoration of my property at Karen's personal expense, a bill that came to over $12,000. The HOA insurance refused to cover her legal fees after evidence of fraud emerged, leaving her to shoulder the financial burden alone. In the end, Karen was sentenced to 18 months in prison for fraud and embezzlement, with an additional 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution of over $40,000 to the HOA for misappropriated funds. The judge specifically cited her flagrant abuse of position and trust in delivering the sentence. As she was led from the courtroom, Karen's final words echoed her disconnection from reality. "I was just trying to make the neighborhood better. Someone had to enforce the rules." The expression on her face, shock mixed with indignation as she realized that rules actually applied to her too, was something I'll never forget.